Let's go to Lou in Seattle. Lou, what's going on, man?
How's, how's it going, Paul? Enjoy the show.
Appreciate it.
Hey, Pete Carroll says it all the time. It's all about the ball. I mean, give me a ball hawking safety that's going to get interceptions and get me that ball instead of a safety that's going to make me vulnerable on the backside by putting them in the box and trying to get sacked.
But
I want my sacks to come from a defensive lineman, four down lineman. That's how you get ahead, not by bringing five or six. And that's what you have to do with Adams. I don't think it's a good fit, Paul. I mean, I like the player. He's a great player. You can't let him go. But at the same time, I like Neal much better in that defense.
Ryan Neal, all right, that's a step too far. That's a step too far, Lou. Here's my question. Optimally, why does a ball hawk have to be someone who's only getting interceptions? Can a ball hawk be someone who's flying to the football consistently, whether it's going after the quarterback or going after running backs that are sweeping the edge or wide receivers on speed sweeps? I don't think that we need to marry ourselves to one definition of that idea, that concept of a player. And I also think, too, it's almost as if we are forgetting what Quandre Diggs is on the back end. I don't think that Jamal Adams is that much of a liability on the back end because they really didn't put him back there a whole lot.
If he's in the box, he is a liability because he's not back there with Diggs. That was the problem with the defense last year. They threw it over the top. Jamal Adams is in the box. Interception is a turnover. A sack is a negative play. That's the difference. I want interceptions. Like, get a Minka Fitzpatrick. He's way better than Jamal Adams, in my opinion. Why? Because he gets interceptions.
Don't sacks lead to interceptions, though? I mean, doesn't a great pass rush create problems for a quarterback?
I mean, leads to interceptions, but it's not an interception.
But interceptions, here's the thing, Lou. Interceptions are not so easy to come across, especially in today's NFL. You can't just force them to happen because you necessarily have a guy back there.
But the league spoke. Minka Fitzpatrick is first-team All-Pro. Why? He had 8 interceptions, if not more. Whereas Jamal Adams had 9, broke a record, had 9 sacks. He broke a record for safety, and he was not first-team All-Pro, as far as I know. And Minka Fitzpatrick is known as a better safety. I'm just using him as a comparison. That's the difference between turning the ball over and sacks.
I think you're looking at the position too traditionally, Lou. And I appreciate the phone call. Good passion. Please call in again. This is good stuff. I don't think that we should consider the safety position to be this one specific version of the position. I really don't. Look, Lou is right in that you win when you have a 4-man pass rush. Look at what the Bucs did in the Super Bowl. And the Seahawks need to get more out of that area. But luckily, they brought back Carlos Dunlap. And for those who don't know, I saw this from Brady Henderson this morning. I think his cap hit is going to be like $2.9 million this season. Good job, John Schneider. Holy smokes. Freeing up cap space left and right and left. Adams is someone who is really effective in going north and south, flying to the line of scrimmage, flying through the line of scrimmage. He has incredible closing speed on the ball. And yeah, you maybe want more interceptions out of him, but was not Jamal Adams their most impactful defensive player last year? And I'd like you guys to point at the real spots where Adams was a liability for the team. You guys are asking him to do something that is not his 100% strength. And here's the thing that you do in the NFL. When you find out things about a player, you put him in positions for him to succeed. Because every player has strengths, every player has weaknesses. We saw Adams exposed when he was covering Julian Edelman in that game against New England, when Edelman ended up carving him up. That took place, though, after Quandre Diggs got ejected for the hit that he had, I think, on N'Keal Harry. Then fast forward to the game against the Rams, where he's playing with a torn labrum. He was in the right spot a couple of times. Couldn't raise his shoulder. I do wonder what a fully healthy Jamal Adams would have done on that pass towards the left sideline that he stepped underneath. It looked like he could not raise his right shoulder there. And then on that play that was deep down the field to Cooper Kupp. He had some bad moments in that game. It was not his best. But I don't think that we should look at the safety position through what used to work here. Look at what you have. And I think this is a guy who is your best defensive player. What would you be without him? Yes, he's not a center fielder. He's not an Earl Thomas. He's not a Minka Fitzpatrick, as Lou laid out. But he's a Jamal Adams. And I really like what Jamal Adams brings to the table. 9.5 sacks as a safety, as a blitzer. That's going to open things up for other guys. And you know what? They had to blitz him as much as they did this past season because they had no help at pass rusher until they got Carlos Dunlap. And then everything started to open itself up. And my hope is that because Dunlap's still back here, and that with Adams as a threat to either blitz or hover around in that area, that you have a guy that's really able to freelance a little bit more. And honestly, I trust Jamal Adams' instincts, and instincts are a huge thing to have as a safety. Earl Thomas had them in a totally different way. Cam Chancellor had them in, I would say, a closer way. Troy Polamalu is the guy that you want to look at and look at Jamal Adams with that kind of context. And to have a guy like that, I would take that guy 100% of the time for north of $16 million a year, for a couple of first-round picks like the Seahawks gave up for him. It's not great to have no first-round picks the next 2 years, but where would you be without him right now? There is a debate over the value of one Jamal Adams, and I'm surprised by it. We heard Rob Statton, who covers the Seahawks. Specifically, I think he looks more at what they do in the draft. I think he does a very good job. He is of the opinion that it's not great value to re-sign Jamal Adams for a contract that could be north of $15 million a year annually, and that if that's what he is looking for, that Seattle needs to think about perhaps trading him and getting some draft picks back. First off, good luck. I don't think you're going to get the draft picks back that you want. Second off, I'm not convinced that the negotiations are going to be as difficult as we might expect. I think people are clouded by the way that things ended for Adams in New York. You have the New York media acting as if the New York Jets can do no wrong, which is hilarious to me. I think that he looked at that situation, he saw what he thought was going to be a team trying to contend turn into a rebuild and said, pay me if you're going to be rebuilding, if you want me to be patient and stick around here. That's at least my hope. Some texts, 710-710. We had a caller, Lou, earlier, who called in 206-421-3776, who I thought brought a great take to the table. He made the comparison to Minka Fitzpatrick. But they do play different positions, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. Quandre Diggs is your free safety. Quandre Diggs is the guy that's playing center field and flying all over the field. Something I think he did great in 2019. Not so much this past year, but I still think he's a plus player that you want to have here for the next couple of seasons. Another texter says everyone wants an Ed Reed. Yeah, you're right. There are very few Ed Reeds out there. So when you find a safety that is really good at certain things, but maybe not in the traditional safety role, it's good to have that on your defense. And it's worth paying a little bit extra for it. Jamal Adams, for yards 1 through 7, with an offense facing it, that guy is all over the field. A ball hawk in a totally different sense. Whether he is blitzing, getting after the quarterback, or just chasing dudes down off the edge, he is a positionless player. It's like a combination of nickelback and linebacker and safety. And these people that are asking for him to consistently be in coverage, you're almost acting like he is just so bad in coverage, too, that he can't do it. He is capable, but you don't want to have him doing that the majority of the time. You want to be able to have him out there, and he's essentially just a wild card, where a quarterback doesn't know what he's going to do. Having that kind of an unpredictable player, especially when you're going up against rather inexperienced quarterbacks, it's a great, I think, advantage to have defensively. We have a texter named Steve who sent in a text and has been a tad condescending for my tastes. Using a safety as a pass rusher to make up for a mediocre defensive line is not the answer. That's a fair point. Is that Seahawks defensive line, though, mediocre now that Carlos Dunlap is aboard? I don't think that they're great by any means. I also don't think that they are mediocre. Not above average range. Mediocre, average is the same word. Mediocre just sounds worse. It is the reason we got beat over the top all last year. Pause for a second. That's not an accurate characterization of the way that the Seahawks defense played last season. The beginning of the year, yes, they got torched over the top. As the season went along, did you see that really at all? Second half of the season? The last time I can remember it, I think there was a deep play in the Buffalo game, which just was a disaster of a game. And I'm hoping that that is not what's going to take place in Seattle or with them going up against anybody next year. There's this one play everyone's highlighting where Stephon Diggs is being covered, essentially looking like man-on-man coverage against Jamal Adams. It was a bad moment, but you shouldn't have Jamal Adams in man-on-man coverage on a wide receiver or in a spot where there's essentially 27 yards to either side of the field for Stephon Diggs to move. And Jamal Adams is just stuck there on an island, essentially. That's not a spot that you want to put him in. You need more play out of your corners. You need better play out of your corners. And to look at Jamal Adams and point at him as possibly a reason for some of their struggles on the back end, I just don't think that's an accurate characterization of the way that the defense went. And you want this other safety. Well, what is that other safety going to do? Is he also going to play Quandre Diggs' position? Because you already have that guy. At least you think you do. You hope you do. Unless you maybe have some questions about Quandre Diggs. The texter continues, Adams is awesome. He's not saying he's a bad player, so I'm with you there, Steve. But he is not what we need to spend $16 million on now. I would just ask, where are you going to spend that $16 million then? You know, what could you have done differently this offseason to give the Seahawks defense a better chance to win? Shaquille Barrett didn't hit the open market. So, pass rusher-wise, who were you bringing in? Really, it was a pretty unconvincing class. Still is a rather unconvincing class. I would also say, too, if you're looking at this money that you have to spend, don't spend it just for the sake of spending it. There are way too many other weak spots to be spending $16 million on the safety position. The texter continues, Bobby is valuable beyond his stats. He is the brains. He is not the brawn that he once was, guys. Not to say he's a bad player. He is not the impactful player that he once was. And Adams has a leg up on him on that front. Ken Norton is not the brains, but Bobby is? Huh? Okay. You have no historical perspective, season ticket holder since 2005, fan since 1976. Okay, congratulations on that front, Steve, but I grew up watching the greatest team ever play football, so I do have a little historical context on that side, and I realize the importance of a safety that doesn't play the traditional safety spot, like, I don't know, Rodney Harrison, who is a borderline Hall of Famer. Oh, he's a cheap player, Paul. Well, that's the kind of player that a coach found a way to maximize his talents and use him in a way that specifically suited his skill set, and that's what the Seahawks should be doing with Jamal Adams, and I think he's worth that money.